Hello, I'm Maciej Mikos. Welcome back to World Talks, where every word matters. Ursula von der Leyen has been chosen by the European Parliament to lead the European Commission for another 5-year term. What should we expect from the bloc in the nearest future? And how is the current political turmoil in the US affecting Euro-Atlantic relations? Well, to talk about it, we're joined by former President of the European Parliament, Pat Cox. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, first of all, how would you comment on Joe Biden's decision to withdraw from the presidential race?
I think that the decision of Joe Biden is, in the end, is welcome. I think it is not unexpected. I feel some sympathy for him. He's a man who's dedicated his entire adult life to public service in the United States. He sought the presidency unsuccessfully on 2 occasions, served as vice president to Barack Obama, and then eventually became president. It is clear that his physical capacity with his aging process has really slowed him down. And I think the idea of stepping aside and allowing some other candidate to emerge, he has endorsed Kamala Harris as his preferred candidate, that this should add more energy and prospect perhaps to the Democratic campaign. But they have a lot of work to do between now and the end of their convention to line up their ticket, to focus on their policy, and to deliver a very key message if they are to have any chance of defeating a united MAGA Republican Party now dominated by Donald Trump.
Yes, some would agree that more than 5 decades in public services. Well, enough. Now, how is the current situation impacting the US support for Ukraine? Well, we have rather uncertain times now.
Look, I'm an enormous supporter of what Ukraine is doing, trying to defend its territory and sovereignty. It is, I think, the major strategic challenge on our continent today to do with securing the territorial integrity and respect for the Charter of the United Nations. And the Ukrainians deserve the fullest support they can get. It's very clear that if there will be a new administration led by Donald Trump in the United States, that it is highly likely to have implications not only in the immediate future for Ukraine, but also potentially wider implications for European security and defence policy in general. And so I think it's really important that in the coming period, a strong emphasis, as is now emerging, on the need to secure Europe's own defence in its own capacity matters. And in the more immediate term, I hope that key European states and the remaining period of the Biden administration will give all of the capacity that Ukraine needs and that they're willing and able to give, and that capacity should be allowed to be used to the fullest extent in prosecuting Ukraine's defensive war against the shocking aggression of Vladimir Putin and Russia.
Right. Now, talking about transatlantic relations, what would the victory of Donald Trump mean for these relations? And should we expect any candidate of Democrats to strictly follow the path laid out by Joe Biden?
Look, I think it's premature to judge. I mean, politics is always a very dynamic and fluid situation. And in the United States, I think the real focus of the electorate happens after Labor Day in September, when people begin to focus on the election. A large number of people looked at that shocking debate a few weeks ago. I think the number was about 17 million. But this is 17 million in a country whose population is 330 million. So, a lot of the focus on the election has still to come. So let's not count any side in or out at present. But there's no doubt from the past policy and from the rhetoric of Trump, and in particular, the even stronger rhetoric of J.D. Vance, his selected vice president, it is clear that transatlantic security relations in NATO certainly, I think, could potentially go through a trying period. My own view, but of course my view is not what counts for US foreign policy making, is that the United States has been stronger by virtue of having strong alliances and willing allies over many decades. And I feel if we begin to deconstruct that, that we are sending a very bad signal to strongmen leaders around the world if they have expansionist, nationalist, imperial or neo-imperial territorial ambitions. So I think there's quite a lot at stake. And there's also a lot at stake for Europe to do with economics. If the America First policy, accompanied by the rampant deployment of tariff barriers, was to become a new norm, I think it would see also the undermining and deconstruction of the World Trade Order as we've known it, which is already under some pressure. But if the state that authored the post-Second World War global order settlement, begins to deconstruct that order and walk away from it, I think it is a free gift to all those other states and groupings of states globally that would like to reverse the structures that have served the United States and that have served Europe and the European Union, and by extension, of course, through its membership, have served Poland extremely well in terms of economic openness, lots of foreign direct investment, and a capacity to trade freely in open global markets. So there really is quite a challenge across a large number of fronts, of which security and defence is perhaps through Ukraine the most urgent, but where the economic one may also prove to be one of the most powerful ones if that process of deconstruction of what is there was to take place under a new US administration.
Security and defense, that was also one of the main points of the political agenda presented by Ursula von der Leyen right before the crucial vote last week in the European Parliament. Well, it was security and defense support for Ukraine as long as it takes in green transformation. Was there anything surprising in her proposals?
I think the proposal, I mean, when you start, Ursula von der Leyen now is confirmed as the president for the second time. But when you begin a second term, you have to address the new circumstances, the new economic circumstances, the new security circumstances, the new political and economic possibilities and constraints. And so I think the areas she focused on were broadly predictable. She talked about boosting public and private investment across all sectors in Europe, from farming to industry and high tech. She talked about trying to ensure a more competitive European economy. She talked about trying to invest in the skills base. She talked in the next budget of ensuring that there are rule of law and fundamental rights protections built in so that there would be conditionality to do with those things. She talked about a new relationship, a new commissioner for relations with the Mediterranean. I think that is a soft signal of a hardening policy on immigration, but let's see how that plays out. She made a concession to the left to talk about a commissioner who would deal with housing. I'm not exactly clear in what way and at what level an intervention at the level of the European Union can impact regional and national housing issues and policies, but let's wait and see. She talked about the democracy shield that you have referred to do with security and defence. and defence spending and the appointment of a defence commissioner. I think these are all useful innovations. We have to wait for the very detailed programme. That will come in September. In the coming period, what will happen? Member states will nominate their commissioners. She has asked them to nominate one male and one female. Many states will do that, some may not. She will then select her team of commissioners. She will give them a brief. She will come to Parliament in September. She will outline a general programme for the coming 5 years. The commissioner designate persons will then be heard by the committees of the European Parliament. It has always been the case in hearings that one or two of them were, for whatever reason, rejected by Parliament and necessitated a new appointment and a second round of hearings. Expect that to last into September, October, and by the end of October, I guess, everything should be lined up for the formal swearing in sometime perhaps in early November of a new Commission President. We will then have a new Council President elected, and of course the new High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy. So that is the programme. The European Parliament this week returns to work on the constitution of its own committees. And it will be interesting to see if the discipline of last week, which effectively had this so-called cordon sanitaire, where the parties of the centre kept the parties of the far right out of virtually all of the power positions, the presidency, the vice presidencies, and the quaestors. There was one vice president from the European Conservative and Reform Group, but he was already a vice president in the previous parliament, and no others got through. This week will be another test of cordon sanitaire. Will the different groups coalesce to prevent the far right from taking the chairmanship of committees? But since there's 25 committees, would they be able to hold that line across 24 committees, would they hold it across all 24? So that's another interesting signal this week of the emerging nature of the new, what you might call, power coalition on the one part and its antithesis on the far right on the other.
Right, as you mentioned, at far right, what do you think the impact of new Eurosceptic anti-establishment groupings such as Orban's Patriots will be on EU's future?
It's clear that they will have a higher profile. They have elected more members to the parliament. If you take the three groups, the Patriots for Europe group, as they call themselves, Mr. Orban's creation, the European Sovereign Nations, which is again a recycling of some other groups from the past, and then the ECR, the European Conservative Reform Group, with the Fratelli d'Italia of Mrs. Meloni, and of course with the Law and Justice Party of Poland. Those three groups together have 187 MEPs. That gives them together 26% of the MEPs in the parliament. So to put it in context, 74% of the MEPs in the parliament are not in those groups. And I think that gives you some statistical measure of the potential effect. They gained more seats, they have a higher percentage of deputies, but it's not yet at a scale that is necessarily capable of exercising radical change. Also, it has to be observed that across those three groups, there are some very deep divisions among themselves and within themselves on different issues of policy. For example, if you look at the far right, I think they all tend to agree on the immigration policy. They have some diverse policies on gay rights. They mostly have been somewhat hostile to the Green Deal, and they're very divided on Ukraine and Russia and European defence. and having a sovereign or autonomous European defence capacity. So although they have 26% of the potential votes, if they are not in fact coherent in terms of policy perspectives, their number of votes may exaggerate the extent of their potential influence. But watch for their influence in governments nationally, of course. Watch for whether far-right commissioner designates are appointed to the European Commission, and watch for how the European Council, with several far-right leaders attending council, will seek to exercise strategic influence. And I think it is across the spectrum of European Union institutions that ultimately we will see their net effect on European politics for the next 5 years. I think also the far right, of course, would take a considerable comfort if Donald Trump won in the United States. And of course, the United States as a kind of an anchor over a long post-war period, an anchor of Western democracy and as an exponent of Western democratic institutions. If that was to change course, who knows what the spillover consequences in demonstration terms could be, not only in Europe, but in democracies across the world.
Former President of the European Parliament, Pat Cox, was our special guest this morning. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
My great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that's all for now. Thank you for watching and stay with us for more. As coming up next, we have our news service with your favorite Don Arlen.